Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us at the Canadian Immigrant Virtual Fair for Eastern Canada. This is presented by Bank of Montreal, BMO. We're thrilled to have you join us for the speaker sessions, and we hope that you're enjoying the fair so far. So I am Ramya Ramanathan, the editor of Canadian Immigrant, and I'm joined by my colleagues Laura Jackman, Ricky Bajaj, and Sanjay Agnihotri. So I'd like to welcome our next speaker for this session. It's an information session on Canada's express entry system and temporary measures related to COVID-19. I'm joined by Teresa Wu, an outreach officer from Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada. She will give you an overview of how federal economic immigration system, express entry work, and explain the three pathways to permanent residence through this system. Teresa will also advise what new temporary measures have been introduced due to COVID-19, and this is to help visitors and workers in Canada. So if you have any questions for Teresa, we'll try to get to a few at the end. Please feel free to type them in the chat. We will be getting to your questions towards the end of the presentation. You can also email us at info@canadianimmigrant.ca. Please note this session will be recorded and available online. So thank you, Teresa. The floor is yours. Please share your presentation. Feel free to share it.
Okay. I am sorry, I don't see the application, so just let me try that again. Close application.
Teresa, can you email it to me as well? So, okay, great, it's working.
Okay, so let me open up. All right. Please let me know if you see the full screen version of the presentation.
Yes, this is great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, and thank you for having IRCC present to you today. My name is Teresa Wu. I am an outreach officer for the Department of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. I am based in the Greater Toronto area, and I have been with the department for over 10 years. So welcome, everyone. Today's presentation topic will be on permanent residence options for skilled workers, and I will also provide some updates on COVID-19 impacts. So in today's info session, we will go over some important concepts. We will talk about work permit programs, including temporary foreign worker program and international mobility program. We will then talk about applying for permanent residence for skilled workers, and we will explore the express entry system. We will then talk about travel restrictions and exemptions, border and quarantine measures, COVID-19 impacts on processing, and finally, if we have time left, we will go through some of your questions. It's important to know that policies and programs are subject to change, so please visit our official website for the latest accurate information, and the website address is www.canada.ca. Important concepts. I would like to share with you what is called the National Occupational Classification, commonly known as NOC. The NOC is a classification system used by the Government of Canada to classify jobs. NOC codes are used to classify work by occupational area and skill level. NOC 0 are management jobs, NOC A are professional jobs, NOC B are technical jobs and skilled trades, and NOC C are semi-skilled jobs, and NOC D are entry-level jobs. For the purpose of this presentation, I've listed all 5 categories, but I would like to let you know that only the top 3 categories are considered skilled occupations. So in order for you to be eligible for permanent residence application through express entry, you will need to have the minimum work experience requirement in either a NOC 0, A, or B category. And I will go through those requirements later on. So let's first talk about options for temporary workers. How do work permits work in Canada? So we basically have two pathways. We have temporary foreign worker program. Work permits issued under this program require a labor market impact assessment, also known as LMIA. The LMIA process is administered by our partner department, ESDC, so Employment and Social Development Canada. That's essentially when an employer says, I cannot find a Canadian citizen, permanent resident, or Indigenous person to fill the job, and that's why I need to hire a temporary foreign worker to fill the job. We also have the International Mobility Program, and these are exempt from the LMIA process because they bring some other benefits to Canada and competitive advantages for Canadians. The temporary foreign worker is administered by ESDC. Under this program, a job offer and an LMIA is required. The employer must determine if the position they are trying to fill falls under high wage or low wage stream. Then the employer applies to ESDC for an LMIA. The employer needs to pay a 1,000 fee per position, demonstrate the efforts they have made to recruit or train a Canadian permanent resident or Indigenous person, offer salaries and working conditions that meet the standards, and pay for the temporary foreign workers' transportation and healthcare insurance if they are coming under the low wage stream. Once a positive LMIA is received, the worker can then apply for a work permit with IRCC. They need to apply online, pay the application fee, and a visa or electronic travel authorization will be issued automatically. The labor market impact assessment is based on the genuineness of the job offer, labor market factors, efforts made to recruit Canadian citizens or permanent residents or Indigenous persons, and a review of employer compliance. The International Mobility Program is administered by our department, IRCC. Under this program, no LMIA is required because of the economic, cultural, or other competitive advantages for Canada. There are usually some reciprocal benefits for Canadians and permanent residents. Both employer-specific work permits and open work permits could be issued under this program. For employer-specific work permits, the permit lists the name of the employer, and the permit holder cannot change employers without applying to change the conditions on the permit. Example includes those coming through mobility francophone, intra-company transferees, CUSMA professionals, and provincial nominees. An open work permit gives the temporary foreign worker the flexibility to work for any employer in any occupation in Canada. Examples include post-graduation work permits, spouses of international students or skilled workers, and participants of the International Experience Canada. Now let's have a look at work permit processing steps. For the temporary foreign worker program, because an LMIA is required, the employer must first apply to ESDC for an LMIA. Once an LMIA is approved, the foreign worker applies to IRCC for a work permit with the approved LMIA. IRCC will then issue the work permit. For the International Mobility Program, because an LMIA is not required, the employer does not need to go through ESDC. So the first step for the employer is to submit an offer of employment in IRCC's employer portal. An offer of employment number will then be generated, and it starts with the letter A. The next step is for the foreign worker to apply to IRCC for a work permit with the A number. IRCC will then issue a work permit to the foreign worker. So in the next section, we are going to talk about permanent residence programs for skilled workers. So before we go into the detail, I'd like to share with you that there are many economic immigration programs. And here is a snapshot of all the programs at a glance. So we have federal high skilled categories, federal business, provincial programs, and federal pilot programs. Under the Federal High Skilled Program, we have the Federal Skilled Workers Program, Federal Skilled Trades, and Canadian Experience class. Under the Federal Business Program, we have the Startup Visa and Self-Employed Program. For provincial programs, we have the Provincial Nominee Program and Quebec Skilled Worker and Business Programs. And finally, for the federal pilot programs, we have the Atlantic Immigration Pilot, Caregiver Pilot, Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot, and the Agri-Food Pilot. Again, here's a snapshot of all of the programs we have for economic immigration, but for today's presentation, we are going to focus on the programs that are being managed through express entry, which is the first category. So we will talk about the Federal Skilled Worker Program, Federal Skilled Trades, and Canadian Experience class. And if you have questions related to the three programs that I'm going to talk about, so please feel free to enter those questions. If you have questions about other types of program, please visit IRCC's official website for more detail. Express Entry is IRCC's online system to manage applications for permanent residence from skilled workers, and it is your first step to immigrating permanently under the Federal Skilled Worker Program, Federal Skilled Trades Program, Canadian Experience class, and a portion of the Provincial Nominee Program. I am a representative from the federal government, so I am only able to talk to the three programs, the three federal economic immigration programs managed through Express Entry. If you are interested in the provincial programs, please consult the individual province or territory's website for more detail. I'd like to also mention that streams and criteria for each provincial nominee program differ across the country as each province and territory have their own priorities. So please do visit their website for that component. So the first step for most economic immigrants is to submit a profile under Express Entry. It is a user-friendly system from profile creation to application for permanent residence. Creating a profile online is free and it does not require an immigration lawyer or consultant. However, there are some upfront costs for elements such as language testing and educational credential assessment. For language testing, your test results must be less than 2 years old from the time you submit your profile, as well as from the time you submit your application for permanent residence. Once you have created your profile in Express Entry, it stays active for 12 months. And since January 2015, foreign nationals must first receive an invitation to apply from IRCC before they may apply to these programs. Now, under normal non-COVID circumstances, IRCC aims to process 80% of complete applications within 6 months. Because of the impacts of COVID-19, the processing time now exceeds 6 months. The department continues to accept applications, and we are making great strides in processing the inventory of applications. Quebec's economic immigration programs are not managed through Express Entry because under Canada-Quebec Accord, Quebec manages its own economic immigration programs. I would also like to mention that a job offer or a provincial territorial nomination is an asset, but it is not a requirement. So you will have, once you've created your profile, your profile stays active for 12 months. If you did not receive an invitation to apply during the 12 months, your profile will expire and it will be removed from the system. At that time, you will have to create a new profile if you're still eligible. Now let's look at the minimum eligibility criteria for each of the programs managed through Express Entry. For the Federal Skilled Worker Program, key criteria include at least 1 year of continuous work experience within the last 10 years in one NOC 0A or B occupation in Canada or in another country. For language skills, you must have a CLB 7 in all 4 abilities. For education, you must have a Canadian secondary or post-secondary diploma, degree, or certificate, or the foreign equivalent, and a score of 67 or higher out of 100 on the Federal Skilled Worker Points Grid, which assesses 6 selection factors, including language skills, education, work experience, age, arranged employment, and adaptability. For the Canadian Experience class, key criteria include at least 12 months of skilled Canadian work experience in a NOC 0, A, or B job within the last 3 years. In terms of official language proficiency, if your work experience falls under NOC 0 or A, you must have a CLB 7 in all 4 abilities. If your work experience falls under NOC B, you must have a CLB 5 in all 4 abilities. For the Federal Skilled Trades Program, key criteria include at least 24 months of work experience in an eligible skilled trade within the last 5 years. Meet job requirements of the skilled trade as set by the NOC, except for the requirements related to certification. For language skills, you must have a CLB 5 in speaking and listening and CLB 4 in reading and writing. Have a valid job offer in the skilled trade for at least 1 year or a Canadian Certificate of Qualification in that skilled trade. All work experience in this program falls under NOC B. For both the Federal Skilled Worker Program and Federal Skilled Trades Program, self-employment and experience gained while studying full-time can count. The Canadian Experience class, on the other hand, experience gained during full-time studies does not count, and self-employment experience does not count. I've also provided the calculation of full-time hours. So for full-time, you need to work a minimum of 30 hours per week for 12 months, totaling 1,560 hours. You can also gain the full-time equivalent hours by working part-time at 15 hours per week for 24 months. If you work in more than one job, you can also accumulate the full-time equivalent hours by working in multiple jobs, as long as you have a minimum of 30 hours per week for 12 months to be considered as 1 year full-time. So once the profile has been created, those who appear to meet the criteria of one of the 3 federal economic immigration programs managed through express entry are automatically entered into the pool of candidates. When a candidate is accepted into the pool, they are given a comprehensive ranking system score. They are then ranked against each other in the pool. Express entry candidates receive points based on their language ability, education, skills, experience, etc. Top-ranked candidates are then invited to apply online for permanent residence. Every 2 weeks, the candidates with the most points are invited to apply for permanent residence. If an individual would like to see what their score would be if they fill out a profile, they can use our comprehensive ranking system tool on our website. The points you get from CRS includes a core set of points up to 600 and a set of additional points up to 600. Your total score will be out of 1,200. The detailed breakdown of how points are calculated is available on our website. The express entry system calculates the points based on the questionnaire you complete when you create your profile. Those with the highest score will receive an invitation to apply in each invitation round. To give you an idea, on September 30th, 2020, 471 was the minimum score that received an invitation to apply. In the next section, we are going to talk about impacts of COVID-19 on IRCC clients. Travel restriction. Travel restrictions stopped most non-essential travel to Canada. No travelers, regardless of citizenship, who shows signs of COVID-19 or indicate they are ill will not be allowed to fly. So no travelers will be allowed to fly if they have any symptoms. Airlines will conduct a health check for travelers prior to boarding. Travel exemptions to Canada include temporary foreign workers, some international students, and some approved permanent residents coming for an essential purpose. For more information, you can visit our webpage that's dedicated to COVID-19. The website is canada.ca/ IRCC-COVID-19. It is a great summary of all the existing temporary measures. And if you go there, you will see all of the new temporary measures and new public policies. Exemptions for workers. The following foreign nationals who are currently outside of Canada are not subject to Canada's travel restrictions. So for foreign nationals who hold a valid Canadian work permit, they can come to Canada. Travelers must present a valid work permit to airline staff in order to board the plane. In addition, foreign nationals who received a positive decision from IRCC on a work permit application, but whose work permit has not yet been issued, can also come to Canada. They need to present a paper copy or electronic version of the approval letter to airline staff in order to board the plane. Upon arrival to Canada, we have the mandatory quarantine of 14 days. Every traveler's health and plan to quarantine for 14 days will be assessed before they are allowed to leave the port of entry. Foreign nationals showing signs of COVID-19 will not be allowed to enter Canada. As of November 21st, all travelers must provide their travel information, contact information, and quarantine plan through the Arrive Can app online. They need to download this app on Google Play or on Apple Store. People without a plan to quarantine for 14 days should not travel to Canada. There are penalties for not following the quarantine plan. Quarantine is mandatory, even for people with no symptoms. Travelers must have a quarantine plan for 14 days after they arrive in Canada. Temporary residents in Canada. International workers in Canada who wish to renew or extend their status must not go to the border, also known as flagpoling. This is considered non-essential travel. International workers in Canada can apply to extend their stay online, and you can see the guide with the number 5553. To extend a stay in Canada, for visitors, they can apply for a visitor record to extend their stay in Canada. For workers, they have two options. If they are no longer working, they can apply to change their status to visitor as long as their work permit has not expired. If they want to continue working, they can apply to extend their work permit if they are eligible. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how COVID-19 is affecting IRCC's ability to process applications. Travel conditions, service disruptions, and country conditions abroad may prevent some applicants from submitting complete applications at this time. IRCC continues to accept and process electronic applications for study permits, work permits, and extensions. No application in progress will be closed or refused due to a lack of documentation as a result of COVID-19 impacts, such as biometrics, medical exams, etc. We have a new public policy for those that are currently a work permit holder and wants to change jobs or employer. Employer-specific work permit holders who have applied from within Canada to change their job or employer will receive an expedited approval to begin their work prior to receiving their new work permit. Who's eligible? Those with a employer-specific work permit, as well as workers who were authorized to work without a work permit. Now, this does not include business visitors or short-term workers under the Global Skills Strategy. People with open work permit can change employers at any time. Implied status. Workers who have applied before the expiration of their work permit can continue to have legal status in Canada until a decision is made on the new application. They may continue to work while the application is in process. Those who leave Canada during processing no longer have implied status. And it's important for everyone to remain in status while in Canada. Temporary residents whose status expired after January 30th, 2020 will have until December 31st to apply to restore their status instead of the current 90 days rule. They may not continue to work while the application is being processed, except in specific circumstances. As a temporary measure, temporary resident applicants are exempt from giving biometrics if they are applying from within Canada. For those that are applying to extend their stay, restore their status, applying for a work or study permit, visitor visa, or for a temporary resident permit. This applies to all new applicants as well as applicants already in progress. You do not need to pay the fee. If you received a biometric instruction letter telling you that you need to give your biometrics, you can ignore this letter. This temporary measure does not apply if you are outside of Canada. Due to COVID-19, employers must let employees follow any order made under the Quarantine Act and Emergency Act. Let workers comply with any provincial law and orders related to COVID-19, and pay the foreign worker for any period they are in mandatory isolation or quarantine upon entering Canada under the Quarantine Act, even if the worker is unable to perform work duties. For more information, you can visit our official website, www.canada.ca/immigration, for accurate and up-to-date information. You can also visit the COVID Special Measures webpage for more detail on the impacts of COVID-19. And finally, we also have the web form. You can send IRCC your questions and inquiry, and somebody will respond to you by email. And we also have social media presence. Follow us on social media because our comms team consistently provide program updates on social media, and you will be able to get up-to-date information there. Thank you very much, everyone. This concludes the presentation. If we have some questions, I can answer some questions if we have time left.
Teresa, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. There are quite a number of questions. I think we'll be able to get to 2 today.
Sure.
Okay, so let me just start. Do remote jobs count towards the required hours?
If your remote occupation is within Canada, so if you are physically in Canada and you are working from home, and that this occupation is under the appropriate NOC category, NOC 0, A or B, then yes, if you're working remotely, you can count those hours to meet the minimum work experience requirements for one of the 3 programs.
And sorry, just to clarify, you have to be in Canada to do this?
Yes, you have to be in Canada to be considered as Canadian experience. If you're abroad, you can still use that experience, and you can use that experience towards the federal skilled worker program, because I've gone through 3 programs, and one of the program is called the Canadian Experience Class. Very specific to that program, the experience must be gained in Canada. But for the federal skilled worker program, the experience could be gained here or abroad.
Great, thank you. Next one. If you're applying for Canadian Express class with 1 year of experience, and during that time you have changed jobs, what are the documents needed from the employer to validate your work tenure?
Okay, so in order to apply to any of the programs under Express Entry, one of the mandatory documents is to have a reference letter from the employer. And the employer must, on that letter, state your job title, your job description, and the duration that you've worked for this company. And they have to specify the weekly hours that you've worked for them, because we have to calculate your minimum hours, and it has to specify that you've worked a minimum of 30 hours per week throughout the 12 months. Or you can work part-time, but 15 hours per week for 24 months.
Great, thank you. And we'll make this the last question. Could you please elaborate more on the possible ways for skilled international students who are currently studying in Canada? Does a self-employed person with under 35 hours account for full-time? I think you answered this. You said over 30 hours is full-time, but then the other part of the question is... Okay.
So it's an international student? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay, so
international students who are currently studying in Canada.
Okay, so there's 2 programs. For the Canadian Experience Class, any experience gained while a full-time student does not count towards Express Entry hours. But for the Federal Skilled Worker Program, you can use experience gained while studying full-time, as well as self-employment towards the federal skilled worker program, but not the Canadian experience class. And if you are working 30 hours per week, then as long as it is consistent, it's continuous in one job, and that you can provide supporting documents to prove it, then you are able to use that experience for the federal skilled worker program.
Great. Thank you so much, Teresa, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Lots of great information. Once again, apologies if we didn't get to your question. Just feel free to send us an email at info@canadianimmigrant.ca, and we will see if we can get them answered for you. And Teresa has kindly shared all the contact information, so please take that down. And we'll have the presentation available sometime next week online. So that's all the time we have. Let me just say thank you to our sponsors. Our presenting sponsor, Bank of Montreal, thank you. Our platinum sponsors, Immigration Consultants of Canada Regulatory Council. Our gold sponsors, British Council IELTS and the Toronto Region Conservation Authority. Our silver sponsor, Fair Grant Writing, Chatham Kent Living CK, and Osgoode Hall Law School at York University. And a thank you to all of our exhibitors. So please rejoin the fair and feel free to chat with the exhibitors who are here to help you. There are a number of immigration consultants here, so feel free to go and speak with them. So you have about an hour and a half to do so, so please go ahead. Our next session will be at 3 p.m. This is our closing panel on the road called The Road to Success is Paved with Soft Skills. Hope you'll join us then. Once again, the fair is open until 4 p.m. EST. If you are chatting with a vendor, please give them a few minutes to, at least a few moments to connect, since many folks are chatting at the same time. So I'm going to sign off. I'm Ramya Ramanathan, editor of Canadian Immigrant. I'm with my colleagues, Laura Jackman, Ricky Bajaj, and Sanjay Agnihotri. So thank you. And once again, thank you so much, Teresa.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.